Welcome to the Tom Nelson podcast. Today I have William M. Briggs here, the statistician to the stars. And William, could you tell us a little bit about yourself to get us going?
Yeah, I'm a dissident scientist. I guess that's the best way to phrase my position. Statistician to the stars. It's a self-awarded label. Ex-academic. I got started doing cryptography in the Air Force a long time ago. Moved from that to meteorology. Was a forecaster for a while. Since I guess we're going to be talking about global warming, so-called climate change, I was I was editor in the 2000s, early 2000s, to something like 2015 or something like this. Associate editor of Monthly Weather Review. I've had articles in Journal of Climate. I've got, 100 plus papers, on and on. I was on the American Meteorological Society's Probability and Statistics Committee, and so forth. But I became skeptical of all the claims that you and I know and love so well, and was routinely and regularly canceled for all these opinions. And now I'm in the dissident sphere, I guess you could say.
Okay, and you have a bachelor's in meteorology, right? And an MS in atmospheric physics. Am I correct there? Yeah. So, and then you've written a ton of books, right?
Well, I did the PhD in statistics, but I did it on forecasts. Forecast goodness. What's a good and what's a bad forecast? How do you tell? Forecast verification, and applied it to climate forecasts. So that's my area. Okay. And I do have a book. It's not for the public per se. It's more of a scholarly book, you might say. Uncertainty. You could find it anywhere. It's not cheap, unfortunately. Springer publishes it. I wish it was half the price. But we do have a book. Jay Richards and Doug Axe and I have a book, The Price of Panic, on the Corona Doom Panic, how a tyranny of experts turned a pandemic into a catastrophe, or some such subtitle. I can't remember that, but it's along the same kind of thing. Over-reliance on models, and belief in experts and the like.
Okay. I mean, I looked you up on Amazon, and I had to keep scrolling. There's lots of other books too, right, that you've written?
Oh yeah, but some of them are. One of them is just you can go to my site, find my site easy enough, and you can get some of these books free. Don't pay for them. So one of them is Breaking the Law of Averages. I wrote that when I was going to be a guest professor teaching like a Stat 101 course, and I don't agree with a lot of the stats theory from the old days and so forth. So I wrote this book to give away to the kids if they wanted it. And it's still available. Things like this.
All right. And then
everything you believe is wrong. Everything you believe is wrong. That's looking at the fallacies which sort of guide our existence, the day-to-day stuff that we see all the time, the fallacies that are so beloved in our culture.
And then you've spoken numerous times at Heartland Climate conferences as well, right?
I have. Yeah. Yes, and some of those you can find online, the speeches. My favorite of those is the need to believe in the solutions to global warming. And that need to believe in the solutions is what drives a lot of the true believers.
Then I saw you have a YouTube channel, and you're active on Twitter, and you have your own website. I have it already in the show notes, so people can look that up too. So you are very active in many different places, it sounds like. How did you get started in climate skepticism?
I wasn't a skeptic at first. I've told the story many times. I was in the Air Force. I was at Kadena in Japan. And that was at the time when global warming was becoming a thing. And I thought it sounded true. And I wrote to one of the original scientists of the original IPCC report, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change report, AR1. And he was very gentlemanly, gave me a copy of the report. I read that, and that's what convinced me to go into meteorology. Climatology wasn't really a discipline per se, a separate discipline at that time. Climatology now has, of course, exploded into its own field, but at that time it was the same as, there was applied climatology and the like, but there wasn't. The dynamics and the thermodynamics and everything were the same as the dynamics you take in meteorology, more or less. So you took a meteorology degree. And I thought it sounded plausible. The arguments that they gave sounded plausible. And I believed pretty much all of it. Not the solutions, perhaps. Some of those tended to be fanciful. But the more I looked into it, I said, all right, so what makes a good model? How can we tell? So I primarily did a lot of work in what's called forecast verification,
Okay.
Looking for things like skill. Skill has a very technical definition, meaning the improvement in some expert model over a simpler model. So for instance, for climate, a very simple model, if you're going to guess the average temperature, very simple model is to say next year will be the same as this year. Very easy, right? Every year you say next year is going to be just like this year. We call that model persistence, okay, because that's what persists into the future. Now, if you have this wonderful GCM, global, used to be called circulation models, now they call them global climate models. If you have this thing built by teams of hundreds of scientists, coders, experts, and so forth over a multi-year period, that model ought to be able to beat persistence, yes, in this climate. If it cannot, then you should not be using these GCMs. And that's what I kind of discovered. Well, we should not be using these things. It does not do that well in actually making predictions, and that's the most important thing.
So I became
after that.
What time frame would this have been when you were looking at this stuff? AR1 was the most recent report out. Would that have been in the late 80s even?
This was in the late 80s. This is when I started. I went to school in the late 80s. I graduated in 92 with my bachelor's, and I was a forecaster with the Weather Service in like 92, something like this for that year. And then in 93, I think I went to Cornell, and that's when I got my PhD. So I was kind of believing all that stuff really all the way through my PhD until I was starting to do, and I left Cornell at 98 or something like this. Although without finishing my PhD, I got a wonderful job offer, but I went back and then I defended my dissertation after I got my job and got the PhD. Okay. And at that point, I became skeptical.
Okay. Were you hearing a ton about global warming back then? Because I was not paying attention to it in the late 90s.
Oh yeah, it was huge. It was huge. It was everywhere in the news. I mean, global warming was the thing. The term, of course, doesn't exist anymore, and that's very important. But it was very feared. I mean, that's Al Gore, and of course, he was pushing this kind of thing, and celebrities started embracing it. And once celebrities embrace something, well, then you really have something. And of course, there was also the global cooling, which you know about in the 70s. Now, they say, there was no consensus back then. That doesn't really count. Yeah, there certainly was a consensus, but it was in a much smaller class of people. Like I say, climatology was not really its own subject per se. There were climatologists, but they were doing more like the regular kind of statistical stuff. What's the temperature here, geographic temperature there, that kind of stuff. And there was fears of a new ice age, and for the same reason, burning of fossil fuels was going to release all these pollutants into the air, hygroscopic particles on which clouds would form, blocking the sun's rays, and the earth would cool. And we would see that, and nuclear winter. That was around the time of nuclear winter and everything. The field was so small that not a lot of people were saying it, so it never really ginned up the panic and fear that global warming did. And then, as you know, global warming, the temperature didn't cooperate with global cooling. It got a little warmer. And then finally, at last, around the year 2000, in the early 2000s or so, the temperature stopped cooperating with global warming. And so they changed the name to climate change, which is an absolutely meaningless thing. It's like saying racism. It doesn't mean anything. Or that is to say, it means whatever is in the minds of the people using it. It has no fixed, definite scientific meaning, or it can be given one, but usually isn't. Climate change, as you very well know, only applies to bad things. Only the bad things can happen with climate change. It'll always be windier, wetter, hotter, drier, all contradictory terms and so forth. Any bad thing you can think of will be exacerbated by climate change. Any good thing you can think of will be limited by climate change. It's a purely nonsensical term, which is why they embraced it, because it's so useful. It's just anything that happens can be climate change. Anything bad, anyway, that happens can be climate change.
So around the year 2000, were you in contact with the scientific community, and you could see that they were totally buying into it? Or I'm curious.
I was working at the time. I was not in academia per se. I had a job in the internet first internet build up in the late 90s and the 2000s till like 2004, 3, something like this. At that time, I went into Cornell Medical School. I was an assistant professor of biostatistics in the Department of Medicine at the Cornell Medical School. So I got back into academics then and started doing this climatology stuff on the side, for which I never received any money. There were no oil companies ever contacted me, much as I would have liked to have some funding from them. No groups of any kind contacted me to give me money, although I would have loved to have had it. The government is, of course, very interested in this problem, and they're spending, billions of dollars on it. And that's never seen as a conflict of interest, strangely, but any money you take from a private group is a definite conflict of interest in the minds of these people. So their priorities are backwards.
Mm-hmm. So, and have you been speaking out publicly against the narrative this entire time, the last 20 plus years or more?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. I have articles going back to the early, sort of mid 2000s, I guess I should say. That's when I left that job, and then I went into the Department of Medicine, and that's when I came back into academics sort of formally. And I was, at that point, I was very much interested in the philosophy of science and the philosophy of probability. I still am. That's my main thing. And I wanted to know, what do we mean by a model? What does that even mean? What's the difference between a model and reality? A lot of people don't know. What does it mean to say, statistical significance? What does probability mean, and so forth? So it took me a lot of years to think of this, do a lot of reading. And finally, in 2016, I had my book Uncertainty. In the middle of that, between like 2005 and 2016, I was doing a lot of global warming, climate change stuff, just showing all the errors, particularly and how time series are handled very, very badly, and stupid things lead to vast over-certainties and so forth. And then I've expanded since then into all areas of science, not just climate change. We got a break, as you know, for political wise anyway, about global warming or climate change wasn't a thing. From 2016 to about 2020. A lot of people wanted to get it back up and running, but they weren't really able to politically. Now, of course, that the Corona doom panic is leaving us, they want to return to this. So I'm going to be doing more of it again, I guess.
Okay. Have you felt like an outcast then? That people have shunned you because you're not?
I've been canceled. I've lost jobs. I'm not going to work with a climate denier. I've lost jobs because of it. Oh yeah. I've lost friendships. I've lost, but an outcast. I don't know. There's, it's not just that. It's also all of the woke nonsense. I've been very outspoken on the woke nonsense, and so I'm completely canceled as far as regular academic employment goes. But I think it was probably at the time I resented it. Sure. But now I think I hope it doesn't spoil grapes, that kind of stuff, but I think it did me a lot of good. I was able to take that time and do all of this independent reading, not trying to fit into any kind of box or area or something like this. And I was able to do a lot of thinking and work on my own that I never would have done had I been dependent on anybody else. So I make my money now just by consulting. I work with all sorts of clients, mostly in medicine and other areas, environmental areas and so forth that, people need consultants or need people who are on the reality side of things.
So do you spend a lot of time in various ways looking at the statistics of things and trying to figure out what the truth is? Or what do you do when you're consulting?
Yeah. I mean, looking at, so for instance, a lot of stuff we're doing now is in the Netherlands, looking at, they have what they're calling a nitrogen crisis. So they rely on this thing called an Arias ops model to make predictions of how the world is going to end because of excess to them, to the model nitrogen. And so we've been working on that the last 8 years, showing that these conclusions are overblown, too dramatic, over-certain, or in many cases, just plain wrong. They're absolutely wrong. This model is relied on by government, the Dutch government. And you may have seen headlines recently that they've decided to close some 3,000 farms and other businesses that are close to these nature areas because of these model predictions, none of which have ever been systematically verified. We have taken our hand at looking at verifications of them and showing how badly they fail. So this is appreciated by the farmers, of course, of the Netherlands, but not so much its rulers.
I mean, have you looked into what's the alleged climate benefit of closing down 3,000 farms in the Netherlands? What's the difference in global average temperature?
There is no benefit. There's only a model-produced benefit. There's only a model-produced benefit, and the benefit is slight. I don't know why they're so anxious to close down their farms. The Netherlands is not a big country. It has a lot of land, it's true, devoted to farming, but if you you got to get your food from somewhere, and I can't believe they're going to close their treasure down. Their wonderful farms, their wonderful cheese, all this stuff they produce, beef. They export all this meat and everything, just because of this vain belief of scientists and their own abilities. It's really quite remarkable. And it doesn't seem that big. Well, the Netherlands is, of course, a small country, but the same kind of thing is going to be happening everywhere. This over-reliance on these models, and that's a big problem.
So do you think the people, though, that are pushing the close down of the farms in the Netherlands, do they really believe that it's going to prevent bad weather, or do they know it's all BS and that they're doing it for other reasons? I'm curious. I don't know.
Well, there's a host of reasons. Yeah, this is the thing. You got to be careful, because there's always a cadre of true believers.
Right.
There's always these people, and there's always the midwits inside government and the bureaucracy and so forth, the experts and midwits who just are following form. They've got the orders from above. Here's what the regulation says. We're going to be following this form. They neither believe nor disbelieve, really, or whether they do doesn't seem to make any difference. They're just pushing this thing forward. This is unfortunately, our form of government in the West, this kind of managerial society, which I call an expertocracy. So there are some rulers who believe this stuff, but there are others who just want to close down the farms for other reasons, political reasons on their own, and they're using this as an excuse. This is what I do call the expertocracy. So you have these rulers, and they have a solution that they want to sell. And because our culture, the Western culture, is so imbued with scientism, which is the belief that science has the best answers to all questions, they believe they have to provide scientific justification for these solutions. So they go on the hunt for experts who will provide them for them. And because of the amount of money in science, there's always going to be at least one scientist they can find who will produce the results that are consonant with their solutions. Whether they do this on purpose or it's just a happenstance, that doesn't make any difference. The rulers then identify these scientists and fund them amply, and these become the science. We've always heard the term. You cannot deny the science. Never science. Listen to the science, the science. That's the science. So these rulers use this science then to justify the solutions that they want to sell. So it's not just one thing. It's all mixed up together in this tangle that if you just stop one side of it, you're not going to fix anything.
Okay. What do you think is going on with scientism over the last couple of years? Doesn't it seem like it's in trouble in terms of people are not trusting the science anymore as much?
Hope so.
Yeah.
I hope so. I mean, after we have the fabulous Fauci running around calling himself science itself. I mean, here I am science. Oh, this kind of nonsense. It did some good. We've seen a lot of good come from these really public explosions of scientists and their idiot models. I'm speaking in particular of Ferguson, who is a botch on the name of science. He produced a model that panicked the world. And in 2020, he has a long history of producing models that panic the world. He did bovine, the swine, the prion disease. He did swine flu. He did bird flu. Every time he's predicting that there's going to be this massive dead bodies that never show up. And so finally, the world was ready to listen to him in 2020, where he predicted there would be something like, I can't even remember what it was, like 55,000 people a day dying from COVID in the summer of 2020. The model was wildly wrong, not even close to being accurate, but everybody believed it and they pushed him, and he hasn't lost his job over it. None of these people who push their bad science have lost their jobs, even though people are starting to come to realize that these guys maybe don't always have our best interest at heart and are absolutely immune to criticism. So we'll see.
What do you think about what's happening on Twitter? I'm pretty happy about the opening up of Twitter, people being able to speak their mind. I think it's wonderful. I don't know if you have any other thoughts on that. Or...
I was skeptical of Musk at first, publicly so, and I'm glad to say I was wrong. I was absolutely wrong. I didn't think he'd fight the regime. I really didn't. I just thought that he was trying to buy Twitter to make money. I still think he's trying to make money off it, but obviously I'm completely wrong about his goals. He has been absolutely transparent so far that we could see, showed all exactly what had happened, all the shutdown of the people who tried to provide alternate voices. And it's the same thing in climatology. It's not that there's not lots of good scientists. I don't want to say that. If you guys are hearing me, I think, oh, this Briggs is dumping on us. This is not the case. There are a lot of good scientists in meteorology, climatology, and the like, so forth. But the conversation is really lorded over by a hand-picked few, the experts. They're the ones who get the big funding. They're the ones who are listened to. They're the ones who take over the organizations and so forth. And so the other ones are canceled or damped down, or you can't listen to them, or they're called deniers, or they keep their mouth shut because they don't want to lose their jobs and all this kind of stuff. So it's the same. It's really the same phenomena as in every branch of science to greater and lesser degree. That's just the way a managerial type society runs. And the only real solution to that is to either overthrow that in some way or put our experts in place of their experts.
Isn't there some chance that with safety in numbers, that if a few more climate scientists start to speak out and say, this alarmism is crazy, that more and more will be encouraged to speak out? I'm hoping something like that will happen.
Yeah, it's possible. It's certainly possible. But it's, well, how did Twitter work? Well, we have this guy who is extremely wealthy and, not much, he could protect himself very well. And the same kind of thing. So whenever these revolutions, either in small or large, happen, it's never the people who make that much of a difference. It's always one set of elites warring with the elites in power. And that's what we see with Twitter. That's what we see in other places. So that's what we need to have. In the current political climate we have in the United States, we have this tremendous uniparty that's broken up mostly into people who call themselves Democrats and people who want to call themselves Democrats but can't get elected as that, so they call themselves Republicans. And so there's no, there are some wars in the fringes of the other side, the Republican side, trying to inject reality into these things, but they haven't won so far, as we just saw. So who knows?
Okay. Have you got to the point where you've looked at the climate models, the actual code, to see what's wrong with them? Or are you looking at it from a higher level and realizing that the results are not good?
Seeing model code, yeah, but have I done an exhaustive study? No, I don't know if anybody has. Maybe somebody has. I can't tell. It depends on the model. This is the thing. There's not a model. There's not like there's one central organization out there that has a model. There's lots of climate models out there. They're from the regional to the large and from big to small and that kind of stuff. So what we need to have is what we need to have these models do. Anybody's model of any kind. That doesn't matter what field you're in or anything. We need to have these models say, right now, here is my prediction for the future. Here's what I think it's going to be for 2023, 4, 5, 6, and so on. Put these predictions out there now, exactly as they are, and then we'll check them. We'll check those predictions as they are right now. A lot of times what you see are these kind of back forecasts, you're never quite sure exactly what you're looking at. The models are tweaked and fitted and then rerun and then re-predicting the stuff that happened as if it didn't happen, but they've been tweaked in order to make them look better for this kind of stuff. There's all kind of statistical tricks that people use, and we can get into them if you want. They're kind of distressing. So we need to have every kind of model that exists to make these kinds of predictions that anybody can check. You don't need to have a fancy, background and so forth in order to check these predictions. That's what's lacking. That's what we really need.
But if we really did understand Earth's climate and it really was basic physics, we only would need one model, right? If we actually did understand it?
It depends. It depends on what your goal was. No, not necessarily. If you're only trying to do mass, like you're just trying to do orbital mechanics, that kind of stuff, looking at just average temperature, just basically due to orbital mechanics. You don't need a model that does convection or something like this. No. So that's another misnomer. That's the problem. It's so complex, this subject. It's just not nearly as simplistic as people who are running around shouting climate change think it is.
Now, wasn't there a guy named Scott Armstrong that had just the model you were talking about, assuming that it's going to 20 years, it's going to be about the same as now? And he's saying the current models mostly couldn't beat that simple model.
That's right. J. Scott Armstrong. Yes. He was big in forecasting, the forecast, not just meteorological forecasting, but forecasts of all kinds. And he was editor of a journal. Was it the International Journal of Forecasting or the Journal of Forecasting? I always get these mixed up. Yes, he's got a new book out, the name of which is escaping me, with another gentleman. And so, yes, so the forecast verification, how to look at forecasts, how to gauge them, how they've done, that kind of stuff. That's a whole sort of mathematical field on its own, and he was big in that. That's what I do too.
Okay. And are you working with other climate scientists that we would know about, like about the nitrous oxide stuff? I know Will Happer's working on that.
Will Happer, yeah, well, we all know each other, that kind of thing. Jaap Hanekamp, he is a Dutch chemist that I work with. So people in the States anymore, I don't have a lot of collaborations. As a matter of fact, no, I'm not in active academia, so I rely mostly on the stuff that I do myself. I am in the Broken Science Initiative. This is a new thing that's just about to start. You can look that up. It's been on my website. Greg Glassman is behind that effort. We're trying to apply these same methods of scientific criticism to science as a whole, because it's not just climate that suffers. Really, every branch of science is in the same boat, more or less.
Why are you working in climate skepticism? What is your motivation?
Because it's a lot of nonsense. It's not the actual physics per se. That part's okay, but misplaced. I mean, they have some wrong ideas in these models about feedback and so forth. As you know, as your listeners probably know, carbon dioxide is not that big a deal. If we doubled it and all that kind of stuff, it's going to lead to a trivial change. So in order to make it look bigger than it is, they have to provide amplification of it inside these models and in the form of these positive feedbacks. When the evidence is, just by looking historically, it's probably negative feedbacks that predominate. So the physics need to be fixed, but that's a science question. It's what people say climate change. It's the average people, the activists, the politicians. To them, what the word doesn't mean anything. It's just a cudgel. It's just like screaming at somebody that they're a racist. It just meant to shut you up. It's these people who want to foist all of these solutions on us when it's just a way to transfer money from us to them, or from the oligarchs, from us to the oligarchs, and they're to have boondoggles like wind energy and solar energy and these ridiculous things. I mean, we've done calculations. If you wanted to replace all of the amount of energy that we consume right now in the United States with solar, just solar, nothing else, you have to take up the landmass of Texas, all of it. Of California, Oregon, and Washington. I think also Oklahoma, or maybe only part of Oklahoma. The entire landmass devoted just to these windmills. And then you would match what we have now because of gasoline and oil and coal. So it's preposterous to think that these things are going to be any kind of solution. So because it's obvious that they can't be, these are not difficult calculations. To anybody who's installing these things, it must be something else. All right. It can't just be that the people in charge of us are that stupid, not all of them. So it must be just a way for them to funnel money from one place to another.
Do you spend much time looking at all these claims of the bad things that are supposed to be happening, like the storms are supposed to already be getting worse and heat waves, et cetera?
Yeah. As a matter of fact, I wrote 2 papers for the Global Warming Policy Foundation over the past couple of years on climate attribution studies, and you can look those up. They're on my site. They're easy to find on the Global Warming Policy Foundation. Now, whenever there's a storm or any kind of weather-related event, then you have these people rushing to their models and say, oh, that was caused by climate change. Or there's a 93% chance it was caused by climate change. All nonsense. All absolute nonsense. And I describe why in these papers, why it's nonsense. And the very simple reason is, in order to make these attribution claims, you need to have a model of the climate. And that model of the climate needs to be perfect. Not just close, but perfect. Absolutely perfect. No scientist is going to say their models are perfect. Yet somehow they're able to say that these attribution claims are on the money. And that's ridiculous. It's just absolutely ridiculous.
So my dream kind of is that when all these crazy stories come out and claims where they're posted on Twitter, and right away a swarm of well-informed skeptics comes and shows the people why they're wrong. It seems like that's starting to happen. I don't know if you're seeing that, but that makes me very happy. If a lot of people show exactly why this claim that this storm is the worst ever is not the worst ever, all that stuff. I think it's great.
Yeah. That is great. On Twitter, I think we'll see that, but on Facebook, no. Instagram, no. On YouTube, I think they stated that they wanted to now move to climate disinformation, yes, so that they're going to be clamping down on people. So I don't know, is this channel going to be on YouTube?
Maybe don't know.
We won't.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to put this on YouTube. This interview.
They still have strict control in certain areas.
What else should we be covering here?
I want to emphasize again, there's a lot of scientific practices that are just over-certain, vastly over-certain. It's not necessarily that they're provably wrong. There's a lot of that. There's a lot of fakery. There's a lot of scams. That's all true. But a lot of the people doing these things, the scientists themselves are not bad people, but they're using methods that they don't themselves know lead to these vast over-certainties. And we need to correct that. We need to correct the way we do science at a basic level, at the sort of philosophical level. And that's my main interest. And if we could do that, then we'd really go far to fixing a lot of things. Not everything, no way, but a lot of things.
Okay, maybe I should bring up maybe the hockey stick then. I don't know the very low down details, but I think Steve McIntyre was saying that the people that were doing the math didn't know what they were doing. And
yeah,
maybe
I'd rely on Steve because he knows that he delved into it right away, and I looked at it and I dismissed it right away. It's just ridiculous. It's just ridiculous. I mean, and then of course this is the way it works. Okay, I want to point out this. This is obviously ridiculous. It's been demonstrated to be ridiculous in detail. All right, by certain skeptics. Now, and everybody knows this, at least inside science. But it's still used. That particular statistic, the hockey stick statistic, is still used by rulers as the statistic, or one that is absolutely demonstrative to them. So that's how it works when we have these kind of expertocracy. So there could be lots of us giving these criticisms, even criticisms that are absolutely damning, like the climate attribution, like I think I've produced. But it doesn't mean that they're going to be acknowledged by the powers that be. It just doesn't mean that. So we have to force that, because a lot of this is just politics, and we have to force that politics using the power, whatever power that we can gain. Simple as that, or not as simple as that, but that's the idea.
I mean, do you have any specific things though that we should be doing as climate skeptics, or what I should be doing to try to change things?
Well, yeah, I mean, we gotta, every time, like you say, every time we see these outrageous claims being made, just, no, here's the right answer. No, here's the right answer. No, here's the right answer. And that doesn't always work, of course, but at least it awakens other people to some extent.
Yeah.
And the more we have, the better. It's all true. But we need to get the leaders of this on our side, the people at the top of these organizations and so forth. That, and the only way to get them, apparently, is to shame them into acknowledging, blatant errors and the like. So how to do that? That's tough.
I mean, do you think it's important for us to speak to our local politicians? That's something I have not done, or local Congress people.
Of course, the more you make it, the better. The more chance you have, right? I mean, all of us, if they're trying to push climate education, there are some schools. I saw this article in the Washington Post 3 or 4 months back. There's one school somewhere, I think it's in Jersey, Every class teaches climate change from gym class on up. So this is pure indoctrination. It's nonsense. There's nothing a 5-7-year-old kid can know about the thermodynamics of fluid flow on a rotating sphere. It's impossible. Not just unlikely, it's impossible. So they can only be filling their heads with nonsense, with ideology, with political slogans and the like. And so that kind of stuff we can absolutely fight back doing and try to get that nonsense completely out of our kids. We've seen other, there was just, it came out a week or so ago, there's a new survey that said, I don't remember the exact number, like 20%, 25% of whatever the adults are, young adults, 20 to 30, are considering not having children because of climate change. Now, these people are ignorant, and I mean that in a polite way, that they don't know about what they speak. But it's not their fault. They've been propagandized from every side for their entire lives. It's no wonder that it's no wonder that you think everybody would believe like they do. So that maybe their propaganda efforts aren't as good as they thought they were, but they are still paying off to some level. So we got to fight that.
I did have one little victory at the local high school here. I found out that they were going to have some climate scam propaganda person come in and sell it in the high school. I found out about that, and I asked for equal time, and they ended up not having either one of us speak. But that made me happy that at least I'd be happy if they heard both of us, but just hearing the propaganda, I'm not happy with. So
that's good. That's good. Congratulations.
Oh, thank you.
I want to point something out. I try to point out, I do a bad job with this, and I want to see if I could do a good job with this. So when you hear climate change, what you're never hearing is, for the most part, you're never hearing claims about small, very slight increases in global average temperature, about which nobody cares, except for maybe 100 guys, on the earth care about this figure. It means nothing to you. You never experience the mean global average temperature, which itself is just based on a model which should have a plus or minus attached to it, which never does. No, what they always mean is stuff that's going to be affected, supposedly affected by climate change. Now, and then it's usually not just the stuff that's going to be affected, but it's going to be the things that are affected by the things that are affected by climate change. So climate change is going to affect supposedly the wheat harvest, which will then affect how much you're going to spend on food. All right. So that's the stuff that most people care about. But we're uncertain of the forecasts already. We don't know the forecasts are accurate. So those have only a chance of being true. And then we have another model, the model on the crops. And that's only a chance of happening. And then we have another model on top of that. That's another model about how the cost of food is going to be. We have this layer of models, all of which are based on other models of the data that go into these climate models. And so we cannot be as certain of this whole as we are of any one of these claims. So, in fact, we shouldn't be certain of anything that they're saying about climate change. The probability of any of this stuff, based on conditional on all this chain of events, is extremely low. But we need to get people to understand that's how it works. We have this chain of model after model after model. Models just feed into other models, and it's a load of nonsense.
Excellent point. Thank you so much for taking the time. I'll get this put online as soon as I can, but I really appreciate it. This is really fun to hear from you. William M.
My
Briggs.
pleasure.
We'll talk to you next time. Thank you.
Thank you.